She stood near the back of the room, holding her instrument with both hands, feeling the cool surface against her palms. The room was larger than she expected, with rows of chairs set up neatly and a long table at the front. Behind that table sat 3 adults, each with papers, pens, and expressions that did not show much interest. They had already been there for hours. She could tell by the way one of them rubbed his eyes and another tapped a pen against the table. Without thinking, she had arrived early, just like she always did. Being early made her feel a little safer, like she could settle her nerves before anyone noticed them. Still, her heart beat fast. She had practiced this moment many times in her head, but standing there for real felt very different. The room smelled faintly of dust and old wood, a smell that reminded her of school halls and long afternoons spent practicing alone. Others waited too. Some sat confidently, talking and laughing softly. They carried expensive cases and wore clothes that looked carefully chosen. A few glanced at her, then looked away. No one said anything unkind, but no one tried to talk to her either. She felt invisible, which was something she had grown used to over the years. When her turn was called, she took a slow breath and walked forward. Each step felt heavy, as if the floor itself was testing her. She stood in front of the table and gave a small nod. One of the adults looked up briefly, then back down at the paper. "All right," he said, without much emotion. "What will you be playing?" She opened her mouth to answer, then hesitated. She had planned to explain her choice, to show that she had thought deeply about it. But before she could speak, another voice cut in. "Keep it simple," the woman at the table said. "We don't need anything too big. Just play something small." The words were calm, almost polite, but they landed hard. She felt her face grow warm. She nodded quickly, afraid that if she spoke, her voice might shake. Something small. She had heard words like that before. Teachers had said them. People at small events had said them. Sometimes they said it kindly, other times like a warning. It always meant the same thing. Don't try too hard. Don't stand out. Don't expect much. She adjusted her grip and took her position. Around her, the room felt distant, as if she were underwater. Her thoughts drifted back to where this all started. She had grown up in a place where dreams were not spoken about often. People worked long hours. They worried about bills, about time, about getting through the week. Her love for music had started quietly. There was no big moment, no sudden discovery. Just an old instrument someone didn't need anymore, and a lot of silence to fill. She practiced wherever she could, sometimes early in the morning before anyone else woke up, sometimes late at night, when the world finally slowed down. She learned by listening, by repeating, by failing again and again. There were days when her fingers hurt and days when nothing sounded right. But she kept going, not because anyone told her she was special, not because people clapped or praised her. She kept going because, in those moments, music made sense when nothing else did. Back in the room, she looked at the faces in front of her. They did not look unkind, just tired, just ready to move on to the next person. She knew they saw many performers like her every day. To them, she was just another number on a list. She lifted her instrument and prepared to play. But before she started, doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if she really was only meant for something small? What if she tried and failed right here, in front of everyone? Her hands trembled slightly. She took another breath and reminded herself why she was there. Not for them, not for approval. She was there because she had promised herself she would try. She began with a simple piece, just as they asked. The notes were clean and careful. Nothing flashy, nothing bold. The kind of music that blends into the background. One of the adults nodded slightly, as if to say, "Yes, this is fine." As she played, her mind wandered again. She remembered being told to lower the volume, to not play so long, to be realistic. She remembered performances where people talked over her music, barely listening. Each memory sat quietly inside her, not as anger, but as fuel. She finished the short piece and let the final note fade. The room was quiet, but not the good kind of quiet. It was the kind that comes before someone speaks just to move things along. "All right," the man said again. "That will be." He stopped himself, glancing at the paper. "You can do one more, if you like, but keep it short." She nodded. This was the moment. Inside, she felt a shift. A calm settled over her that surprised even her. She realized that she had nothing left to lose. They already expected very little. Playing safe would change nothing. She adjusted her stance slightly. Her fingers found a different position, one she knew by heart. This was not something she usually shared. It was something she played alone, Late at night, when no one was listening, she began softly. The sound was gentle at first, almost shy. It did not demand attention, but it carried feeling. It carried truth. Slowly, she added more depth, more movement. The notes started to weave together, telling a story without words. At first, no one noticed. Papers were still being sorted. A pen was still tapping. But then the sound changed. It grew richer, stronger, not louder, just fuller, like a voice finally finding its confidence. One of the adults looked up. She kept playing. Her hands moved with ease now. The nerves were gone. Every hour of practice, every lonely night, every quiet hope flowed into the music. It was not perfect, but it was real. The tapping pen stopped. Another head lifted. The room seemed to lean toward her, even if no one moved. She felt connected to the sound in a way she rarely did in front of others. She was no longer thinking about judgment or rules. She was simply playing. She had been told to play something small, but what came out of her was anything but small. The room stayed quiet after the last note faded. Not the rushed quiet from before, but a deeper one. It felt like everyone was holding their breath, even though no one meant to. She lowered her instrument slowly, unsure of what to do next. Her heart was still racing, but her hands felt steady now. She looked up. All three adults were watching her. No one was sorting papers anymore. No one was tapping a pen. Their faces had changed, though it was hard to say how. It wasn't excitement exactly. It was surprise mixed with something else, something they didn't expect to feel. She shifted her weight, suddenly aware of how long she had been standing there. Part of her wondered if she had done something wrong by not keeping it small like they asked. Another part of her felt proud, even if nothing came of this moment. "Where did you learn to play like that?" one of them asked. The question caught her off guard. She hadn't prepared for it. She wasn't used to being asked things like that. Usually, people just nodded politely or moved on. "I learned on my own," she said after a short pause. Her voice was calm, though she felt a small shake inside. "I practiced a lot." They exchanged quick looks. No one smiled, but no one looked bored anymore either. "That wasn't on the list," the woman said, pointing lightly at the paper in front of her. "What was that piece?" She hesitated. "It's something I worked on myself." Another pause. Then the man who spoke first cleared his throat. "Thank you," he said. "You can wait outside for now." She nodded and turned to leave. As she walked back across the room, her legs felt strange, like they were not fully hers. She couldn't tell if she had impressed them or confused them. All she knew was that something felt different from other times outside. The hallway was long and quiet. A few others waited there too, sitting against the wall or standing near the windows. Some looked up as she walked past, trying to read her face. She kept her eyes forward and found an empty seat. She rested her instrument beside her and leaned back against the wall. Only then did she let herself breathe fully. Her thoughts raced. Had she gone too far? Had she broken some unspoken rule? Or had she finally been heard? She thought about all the moments that led here. The nights she wanted to stop. The times she doubted herself. The voices that said it was just a hobby, not something real. Those voices were quiet now, at least for the moment. Time passed slowly. The sounds from inside the room were faint. Applause came once, then stopped. Someone else was being thanked and sent away. She watched the light change through the window as the afternoon moved on. As she waited, her mind went back to a memory she hadn't thought about in years. She had been younger then, sitting in a small room with peeling paint and a broken chair. She had played for someone she admired, someone whose opinion mattered a lot to her. When she finished, that person smiled kindly and said, "You're good, but don't expect too much from this." At the time, she believed those words. She carried them with her like a warning. Dream carefully, hope quietly. But today, for the first time, she had ignored that warning. The door opened, pulling her back to the present. One of the adults stepped into the hallway and called her forward. She stood quickly, almost tripping over her own feet, and followed back in the room. The chairs were emptier now. The long table was still there, but the mood had changed. The adults looked more alert, more focused. "Have you performed anywhere before?" the woman asked. "Not really," she answered honestly. "Just small places. Why haven't you tried for more?" Another asked. She thought for a moment. "I didn't think I was ready." They nodded, as if that answer made sense. One of them leaned forward. "You have something," he said carefully. "It needs work, direction, but it's there." Her chest tightened. She didn't know what to say, so she said nothing. "We see a lot of people," the woman added. "Many are technically good. Fewer have feeling." That's harder to teach. She listened closely, afraid she might miss something important. They explained the next steps slowly. Nothing was promised. Nothing was guaranteed. But there was interest. Real interest. Not polite approval. Not empty praise. She nodded through it all, thanking them when it felt right. When she finally left the room again, her feet barely touched the ground outside. The hallway felt brighter than before. The others waiting looked up again. This time, she met their eyes and offered a small smile. One person smiled back. As she stepped outside the building, the air felt cool against her face. She paused on the steps and looked down at her hands. These hands had carried her through so much doubt. They still trembled slightly, but they felt strong. She knew this was not the end of her story. It wasn't even the beginning, really, but it was proof that listening to herself had mattered. She walked away slowly, carrying more than just her instrument. She carried a new kind of confidence, quiet, careful, but real. She had been told to stay small, and for the first time, she knew she never would again. The days that followed did not feel real at first. She went back to her normal routine, but everything felt slightly different, like the world had shifted just enough for her to notice. She still woke up early, still practiced when she could, still handled the same daily responsibilities. Yet inside her, something had changed. A quiet sense of belief had taken root. Even though she tried not to think about it too much, she replayed the moment in that room over and over in her mind. The way the adults looked up, the silence that followed her playing, the questions they asked. She reminded herself not to build false hope. Nothing had been promised, but even so, she felt lighter than before. A message came a few days later, short and simple. They wanted her to return for another session. This time, it would be longer. This time, others would be there to listen. She read the message twice, then a third time, just to be sure. Her hands shook slightly as she set the phone down. She sat still for a long moment, letting the feeling wash over her. Excitement mixed with fear, gratitude mixed with pressure. This was different. The night before the session, she barely slept. She practiced quietly, careful not to disturb anyone. She played through pieces she knew well and others she was still unsure about. Every mistake felt louder than usual. Every pause felt heavy. At one point, she stopped and rested her forehead against the instrument. Doubt crept back in. What if the first time was just luck? What if she disappointed them now? She closed her eyes and reminded herself of why she played in the first place. Not for approval, not for praise. She played because it made her feel whole. That thought steadied her. The next day, the building felt less intimidating, but more serious. More people moved through the halls. Some carried instruments like hers. Others spoke quietly in small groups. She noticed how confident many of them seemed, how sure of their place. She found her seat and waited. When it was time, she walked into a larger room than before. Chairs were ranged in rows. More faces looked her way, some curious, some distracted, some already judging, though they didn't mean to. She took her place at the center. The air felt thick. She could hear her own breathing. No one told her to keep it small this time. Still, she felt the weight of expectation, not just theirs, but her own. She began with something controlled, something familiar. The sound filled the room, steady and clear. People listened politely. Then she took a risk. She moved into a piece that required more from her, more feeling, more honesty. Her fingers moved faster now, then slower, shaping the sound carefully. She let herself lean into it, trusting the muscle memory built over years of quiet practice. She forgot where she was. The room faded away. The faces disappeared. There was only the music and the story it carried. It spoke of long nights, of being overlooked, of holding on to hope when it would have been easier to let go. When she finished, she didn't rush to look up. She let the final sound settle. This time, the silence felt different again. Then someone started clapping. It wasn't loud at first, just one pair of hands. Then another. Soon, the room filled with applause. Not wild, not exaggerated, but real. Her throat tightened. She bowed her head slightly, more out of emotion than habit. The feedback came slowly. Thoughtful words, honest critique mixed with encouragement. They spoke about her control, her emotion, her potential. They also spoke about areas to improve. She listened carefully, grateful for every word. Afterward, others approached her. Some offered quiet compliments. Others asked where she learned to play like that. She answered simply, never overstating her journey. As she packed up, she noticed something new. People were watching her with respect. That feeling stayed with her. Weeks passed. She was invited to more sessions, more opportunities to play. Each time, the room grew a little larger, the audience a little wider, the pressure a little heavier. There were setbacks too, days when her playing felt off, moments when criticism hit harder than she expected. She learned quickly that growth was not a straight line. One evening, after a particularly difficult session, she sat alone and questioned everything again. Was this path really for her? Was she strong enough to keep going? She picked up her instrument and played softly, not to impress anyone, but to remind herself who she was. The sound calmed her, centered her. She realized then that success was not just about being seen. It was about staying true to the reason she started. Another invitation came, this one bigger than the rest. A public performance, a real audience, people who did not know her story. She stood backstage, listening to the noise of the crowd. Her heart raced, but her hands felt ready. When she stepped into the light, the room fell quiet. She began to play. This time, there was no holding back, no fear of being too much. She let the music rise and fall naturally. She trusted herself. When it ended, the response was immediate. Applause filled the space, louder than anything she had heard before. She smiled, tears burning in her eyes. She had been told once to play something small. Standing there now, she understood how far she had come, and she knew this was only the middle of her story. After the applause faded, life did not suddenly become easy. In some ways, it became harder. More people noticed her now. More eyes followed her when she walked into a room. With that attention came expectations, and expectations can feel heavy. She tried to stay grounded. She kept her routine simple. Practice, rest, repeat. She reminded herself that she was still the same person who once played alone in quiet rooms. But the noise around her was louder now, and it was harder to ignore. Messages began to arrive more often. Some were encouraging, others were confusing. Different people offered advice, sometimes in opposite directions. One said she should focus on technique. Another said emotion mattered more. Someone else warned her not to rush things. Another urged her to move faster while the moment was hot. She listened, but carefully. Too many voices can pull a person apart. At one session, she was asked to change her style slightly. Nothing drastic, just small adjustments. At another, she was told to be bolder, to take more risks. Each request made sense on its own, but together they left her unsure of who she was supposed to be. One evening, she sat alone after practice, staring at the floor. Her instrument rested beside her, silent. For the first time in a long while, she felt tired in a way that sleep could not fix. She wondered if this was what she had wanted. She thought back to the first time she was told to play something small. Back then, she felt invisible. Now, she felt stretched thin. Both feelings scared her, but in different ways. A few days later, she had another performance scheduled. This one mattered. People with influence would be there. The kind of people whose opinions could open doors or quietly close them. Before stepping on stage, she stood in a quiet corner, eyes closed. Her breathing was shallow. Her thoughts raced. What if she chose wrong? What if she tried to please everyone and pleased no one? She remembered something simple. Music had never asked her to be perfect. It had only asked her to be honest. She walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, but she focused on the familiar feel of her instrument. She began to play. The first notes came out careful, almost too careful. She felt it immediately. Something was off halfway through. She made a mistake, a small one, but noticeable. Her heart skipped. For a brief moment, panic threatened to take over. She could stop, she could start again. Instead, she kept going. She let the mistake pass and leaned into the next phrase. She allowed herself to feel the music instead of controlling it. Slowly, the tension eased. Her playing grew warmer, more alive. When she finished, the response was polite but restrained. There was applause, but not the kind that lifts you up. She thanked the audience and stepped off stage, unsure of how it had gone later. The feedback came. Some praised her recovery after the mistake. Others focused only on the error. A few questioned whether she was ready for this level yet. Those words lingered. That night, she couldn't sleep. She replayed the performance again and again. The mistake felt larger each time she thought about it. Doubt settled in her chest like a weight. The next day, she skipped practice for the first time in years. Instead, she went for a long walk. The world moved around her at its normal pace. People laughed, talked, hurried past. No one knew what she was carrying inside. She realized something important during that walk. She had started measuring herself only by reactions, applause, feedback, approval. Somewhere along the way, she had stopped listening to herself. That scared her more than any mistake on stage. When she returned home, she picked up her instrument, not to prepare for anything specific, but to reconnect. She played slowly, without pressure. The sound felt like a conversation with an old friend. Over the next weeks, she made a choice. She would listen to guidance, but she would not lose her voice in the process. She would grow, but on her own terms. Another opportunity arrived, bigger than the last, the kind that could define her path for years to come. This time, she prepared differently. She practiced deeply, but she also rested. She sought feedback from people she trusted, not everyone who offered an opinion. She reminded herself daily why she played. On the day of the performance, she felt nervous, but steady. The fear was still there, but it no longer controlled her. She stepped on stage and began. The music flowed freely. There were no big mistakes, no moments of panic, just honesty, just presence. When it ended, the response was strong, genuine. People stood. Some wiped their eyes. She felt it in her chest before she heard it in the room. Backstage, someone told her quietly. That felt real. Those words meant more to her than any loud praise. She understood now that the journey was not about never failing. It was about learning who she was when she did. She had been told once to stay small. Now, even in moments of doubt, she knew she was standing in her truth, and that made all the difference. The weeks after that performance moved quickly. Invitations came and went. Some led to new chances, others quietly faded away. She learned not to chase every open door. She chose carefully, guided by a clearer sense of who she was and what she wanted to say through her music. She still felt nervous before stepping into new rooms. That never fully disappeared, but the nerves no longer felt like a warning. They felt like a reminder that what she was doing mattered to her. One morning, she received an invitation that made her pause. It was for a performance that would bring together people from different places, different backgrounds, and different levels of experience. It was not the biggest stage she had seen, but it was meaningful. The focus was not on competition. It was about sharing stories through sound. She accepted. Preparation this time felt calm. She practiced with intention, not urgency. She paid attention to rest, to quiet moments, to balance. She also took time to reflect. She thought about the long road that brought her here. The small rooms, the lonely hours, the moment she was told to keep it small. She smiled at that memory now, not with bitterness, but with understanding. People often spoke from their limits, not hers. The day of the performance arrived. The venue was warm and inviting. The air buzzed with soft conversation. People moved slowly, greeting one another with ease. There was no pressure to impress, only an invitation to be present. When it was her turn, she stepped forward and took a breath. She looked out and saw faces waiting, not judging, listening. She began to play. The music unfolded naturally, like a story she knew well. It moved through quiet moments and stronger ones, through tension and release. She let it breathe. She trusted it. As she played, she felt connected not just to the sound, but to the people in the room. She could sense their attention, their stillness. Some closed their eyes, others leaned forward. The space felt shared. When the final note faded, there was a pause. Then applause filled the room, warm, grateful, real. She bowed her head, feeling a deep sense of peace. Afterward, people approached her one by one. Some thanked her for the way the music made them feel. Others shared small pieces of their own stories. She listened closely, touched by the honesty. One person said quietly, "I needed that today." Those words stayed with her. Later that evening, she sat alone for a moment, her instrument resting beside her. She thought about what success meant now. It was no longer just about recognition or opportunity. It was about connection, about staying true while growing. She knew challenges would continue. There would be future mistakes, moments of doubt, periods of uncertainty. But she also knew she had the tools to face them. She had learned to listen to herself. In the months that followed, she found herself in new spaces, teaching small groups, collaborating with others, playing for audiences both large and small. Each experience added something to her journey. She also noticed something unexpected. Others began to seek her out, not just for her skill, but for her honesty. Younger performers asked questions. Some shared stories of being underestimated, of being told to stay small. She listened with care. When asked for advice, she never spoke in big statements. She simply said what had worked for her. Practice with patience. Take feedback, but know your own voice. Do not let fear decide your limits. One evening, after a long day, she returned to the same quiet space where she once practiced alone. She played softly, just for herself. The sound filled the room gently, like it always had. She realized that the person she was at the beginning of this story was still there, still curious, still dedicated, just stronger now, more sure. She thought again of that moment, standing in front of a table, being told to play something small. She remembered the warmth in her face, the doubt in her chest. She was grateful for that moment. It had taught her something important. Not everyone would see her right away. Not everyone would understand. But that did not define her worth. What mattered was the courage to keep playing, to keep growing, to keep trusting herself. As she packed up her instrument and turned off the light, she felt a quiet confidence settle in. Not loud, not demanding, just steady. Her story was not about proving others wrong. It was about proving herself right. She stepped forward into whatever came next, carrying her music with her. No longer small. Never again.